Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be looking at some anticipated fantasy releases for the month of June. This is actually going to be part 1 of 2, as there are so many things coming out in June that I wanted to ensure that we dedicated enough time to all of these. So for today we're going to be going up through June 10th, and then in part 2 we're going to pick up from there.
Before jumping into the anticipated releases, a big thank you to Book of the Month for working with me on today's video. I've said a number of times over the years that I actually do have my own Book of the Month account because I genuinely use and enjoy their service. There are a number of reasons why I keep my account and why I really like Book of the Month. For one, even though fantasy is my one true love and my home base, I do occasionally like dipping my toes in other genres, and obviously with the way that Book of the Month works, you have at least 5 books to choose from, sometimes more. You have books and audiobooks that you can use your credits on, and they are all coming from a variety of different genres. Sometimes the fantasy anticipated releases that I have are actually their selections, which is just perfect and seamless, and those will be the ones that I pick. Other times though, there will be something that if I'm in the mood for a thriller, a mystery, a contemporary romance story, I don't often know where to start. And so by having Book of the Month sort of do the work for me, it allows for me to get a really clear and concise picture of what each of the works have to offer. And then I can decide, okay, that actually sounds like something I would really enjoy. Also, my husband and I have very different reading tastes. So it's nice because on occasion there will be something that actually he thinks sounds interesting, or there's an author that he's had his eye on. You can also use your credit either for a book or you can use your credits for audiobooks. And I really like that they're continuing to expand. They're always branching out and trying to improve. And of course, I think a lot of us find that while we love books, we don't always love what they do to our wallets. And so it is really nice that their brand new hardbacks are a much more affordable price than they would be if you were to get them elsewhere.
For May, I picked out 2 different books. One would be the first in a dystopian fantasy story where psychic gifts are a death sentence and there are rules to survival. Trust no one, lie to everyone. The additional book that I got is called The Love Haters. I had checked out a previous book by this author through Book of the Month, and I found the representation of somebody being a caretaker to a parent to be really fantastic. So I decided to check out this one as well, and it says it's a thin line between love and love hating. If you're interested in checking out Book of the Month for yourself, you can get your first book for $5 with the code BOUQUET, plus you can get a free hat, which I definitely indulged in because I really like the hat.
Again, a huge thank you to Book of the Month. Now on to our anticipated releases.
Jumping into it, we're going to start with June 3rd. There are a lot of books for this specific date, so we're just going to go all the way through all the ones for June 3rd. Kicking it off, we actually have a sci-fi book, but I know a lot of you really like this author, and a lot of you have also picked up works by this author that are both sci-fi and fantasy, so I still wanted to mention it, and that would be Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky. On a planet shrouded in darkness, a stranded crew must fight for survival, but the darkness may have plans of its own in this wildly original story from Adrian Tchaikovsky. They looked into the darkness, and the darkness looked back. New planets are fair game to asset strippers and interplanetary opportunists, and a commercial mission to a distant star system discovers a moon that is pitch black but alive with radioactivity. Under no circumstances should a human end up on Shroud's inhospitable surface, except a catastrophic accident sees Juna and Mai doing just that. Forced to stage an emergency landing in a small, barely adequate vehicle, they are unable to contact their ship and are running out of time. What follows is a grueling journey across land, sea, and air. During this time, Juna and Mai begin to understand Shroud's dominant species. It also begins to understand them. I have wanted specifically to pick up Children of Time by this author. I know that's one of the ones that he's very known for. I've only picked up one thing by them, and it didn't really work for me. And for some people, it's something they absolutely love. That book specifically would be Guns of the Dawn. And that one was somewhat of a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but what if the character had to go to war? And I liked the premise. There were a lot of themes that I really appreciated about the story, but the execution just didn't quite work for me. However, I have wanted to try something else by this author. I've heard that the sci-fi in particular is very innovative and very creative. So Children of Time has been on the list, and it's been one that I thought, okay, maybe that'll be the next one I give a go. But Shroud might be the one. It just sounds so intriguing. It seems like it's got that suspense feeling that a lot of sci-fi stories of that sort have. So we'll see. That's definitely one that I'm going to keep my eyes on. Next up, we have Song of Legends Lost. An unforgettable tale of revenge and rebellion unfolds when a reckless king implements an ill-fated plan to end a 1,000-year war in this relentlessly gripping epic fantasy debut. I've been really excited to see, with the amount of anticipated releases videos that I put out, how many of them are starting to showcase epic fantasy again. That has me really excited. I know I've commented before, because there are a lot of conversations about where is all the epic fantasy gone? How come it's just fantasy romance and cozy fantasy? And while I understand people feeling as though all the trendy things and all the things that are getting all the marketing behind them and thus the money behind them, and then that leads to popularity, are the things that tend to be fantasy romance or romantasy or cozy fantasy, standalones, those sorts of things. While I understand the frustration with that, one, it's still there, it's just not getting as much attention, I think. And two, I also find that there is usually a pendulum swing where when something starts to get really on trend, it gets almost oversaturated, and then people are looking for something different, and then that's when you'll kind of see us swing back the other way, and I'm wondering if we're starting to enter that. Getting back to this particular story, though, reminder, A Song of Legends Lost is the title. The full synopsis says, a song of rebellion, a song of war, a song of legends lost. The people of 9 lands know their history. The kingdom once belonged to the scathed people until their grey-blood servants rose up and slaughtered them. King Ahiki and his warlords laid claim to the realm by defeating the rebels and driving them out of the Feverlands. Now, thousands of years later, attacks by the Greybloods are rebuffed by the Invoker clans, warriors of noble blood who summon their ancestors to fight with them in battle. That sounds awesome. I like that part. But the war has gone on too long. A general draft is called to take the battle to the Feverlands and defeat the Greybloods once and for all, a plan that seems doomed to fail. When Temmie, a commoner, accidentally invokes a powerful spirit, she believes it could be the key to ending the centuries-long war, but not everything that can be invoked is an ancestor, and some of the spirits that can be drawn from the ancestral realm are more dangerous than anyone can imagine. That sounds so cool. I'm so ready for that. I think it sounds awesome. I really hope it's as good as it sounds, because I think it sounds really, really incredible. Switching gears, now we are getting into something that is cozy fantasy again. I also just want to know, I don't have a problem with the existence, in case that wasn't clear, of cozy fantasy, fantasy romance, or dipping our toes into other subgenres and having them get some time in the sun. I like things all around. I like fantasy in all its different forms. I just know a lot of people feel like we've been losing some of the epic fantasy. Anyway, A Fellowship of Librarians and Dragons is the next one, which I like that title. Spilling the tea has never been so cozy. It's so embracing. It knows exactly what it is. In the quaint town of Adenshire, Dolly Butterbuckle, a people-pleasing sunshine dwarf, is content with her simple tea magic and circle of friends. It's true she's never quite lived up to the family's expectations, but life is just fine until her parents arrive with an inherited dragon egg and a charming gargoyle. As Dolly grapples with her newfound responsibility and discovers a long-hidden side of herself, she must face an overbearing family, a sinister plot, and a mischievous dragon that refuses to stay out of trouble. But with the help of her loyal friends and newfound love, Dolly embarks on a heartwarming adventure, revealing that embracing her true self is the most enchanting path of all. It sounds quite darling and cute, and it does seem like, because there's different versions of cozy fantasy, it's already a subgenre, but then you could kind of break it apart into other specifics even from within that. And some cozy fantasy feels more adventurous, like it's a quest fantasy, but a cozy quest fantasy. I think something like Free Run Beyond Journey's End has that. Then you have the ones that are a little bit more fantasy mixed with some romance, or maybe even lean more contemporary romance with sprinkles of fantasy elements, something like The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Then you have things like Travis Baldrey's Legends and Lattes, which this one feels like it's maybe leaning into that a little bit. Anyway, it sounds very cute. It seems like it's got the sword and sorcery pieces within it, but with those lower stakes. Next up, we have A Forgery of Fate. This is by Elizabeth Lim, who has written quite a few other works to this point. The one that I think gained the most popularity was Six Crimson Cranes. It says a breathtaking romantic fantasy inspired by Beauty and the Beast about a girl who paints the future and a cursed dragon lord bound by love and deception in a plot to bring down the gods. I do think that Beauty and the Beast retellings, there were so many of them for so long, and then I think we've kind of backed off and we're seeing a return of them maybe a little bit here and there. I know something like The North Wind was also a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I don't see too many in young adult. I feel like a lot of times they lean more towards adult fantasy, and this one is currently categorized as teens and YA, so we'll have to see how it plays out. The next one is also considered teens and YA, and that would be The Celestial Banquet. This one sounds like it could be really, really fun. It says, Iron Chef meets the Hunger Games in Lim's dazzling YA fantasy debut following a young noodle chef who competes in a cutthroat cooking competition for the gods. That sounds really fun. And actually, interestingly, Elizabeth Lim had a story, so obviously different authors, but Elizabeth Lim, who we were just talking about, had a story where a character was in a competition, but it was for the creation of, I'm totally spacing on the word for it, but like a seamstress, when you make clothes and whatnot. And so the tagline was Project Runway meets Mulan, because she had to disguise herself as her brother to go. And it's unexpected because there is a little element of, how is this going to be high stakes? I think that's a fair question, and then seeing how the authors manage to build that into the story is half the fun. But I've never really seen a cooking competition fantasy before. This next one is a sequel, so I can't say too much about this one just because obviously I don't want to reveal anything from the first book, but that would be The God and the Guishine, and this is a sequel to The God and the Gumiho, and it's also projected for June 3rd, so many of them for this date. But it says, in this swoony sequel to The God and the Gumiho, a trickster god must work with... Actually, I can't read it. I can't read it because it's going to give away something about how the first book ends. But it's a sequel to The God and the Gumiho, which is basically, I always describe it as like reading an anime in novel form, which I suppose is kind of like light novels. But anyway, I do feel like it's just pure shenanigans and fun and really exaggerated reactions to things. And it's kind of the tiniest bit got hints in that first book of the Dresden Files, but with very different lore as its inspirations. And the characters are really larger than life and over the top, but it knows it. So it plays around with it in a way that I think is quite fun. Next up, we have finally entered June 10th. So we're segueing out of June 3rd. The Witch Roads is the title of the next one, and it is the first book in an epic fantasy duology by Kate Elliot. It says, status is hereditary, class is bestowed, trust must be earned. When an arrogant prince and his equally arrogant entourage get stuck in or let her halt as part of a brutal political intrigue, competent and sunny deputy courier Ellen, once a child slave meant to shield noblemen from the poisonous pall, is assigned to guide him through the hills to reach his destination. When she warns him not to enter the haunted spires, the prince doesn't heed her advice, and the man who emerges from the towers isn't the same as the man who entered. The journey that follows is fraught with danger. Can a group taught to ignore and despise the lower classes survive with a mere deputy courier as their guide? The last book for today, still on June 10th, and also the end of part 1 of our June anticipated releases, we have Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is definitely a what I'll call auto-intrigue author. So obviously people usually use the term auto-buy, but I say auto-intrigue because anything this author puts out, I'm instantly intrigued by. Her ideas are always fascinating. While I certainly like some of her works more than others, I still have always enjoyed everything I've picked up. There's never been anything that I've been extremely disappointed by or anything like that. I just think that she's exceptionally creative, and I really actually genuinely enjoy the writing itself of her stories. So many of them explore different things than the others. There's not one story that feels really identical to a different of hers. Anyway, so it says, this is a story about hunger. 1532, a young girl grows up wild and wily. Her beauty is only outmatched by her dreams of escape. But Maria knows she can only ever be a prize or a pawn in the games played by men. When an alluring stranger offers an alternative path, Maria makes a desperate choice. She vows to have no regrets. This is a story about love. 1827. A young woman lives an idyllic but cloistered life on her family's estate until a moment of forbidden intimacy sees her shipped off to London. Charlotte's tender heart and seemingly impossible wishes are swept away by an invitation from a beautiful widow, but the price of freedom is higher than she could have imagined. This is a story about rage. 2019. College was supposed to be her chance to be someone new. That's why Alice moved halfway across the world, leaving her old life behind. But after an out-of-character one-night stand leaves her questioning her past, her present, and her future, Alice throws herself into the hunt for answers and revenge. This is a story about life, how it ends, and how it starts. It's a little dramatic of a synopsis. That doesn't surprise me, though. I feel like there's always a hint of drama in V.E. Schwab's general synopses and the presentations of the stories, and there's always just this underlying darkness throughout everything, this moodiness, which isn't always something I love in other works, but with hers, it tends to be right up my alley. I'm really excited to see another work by V. Schwab. In general, though, I'm really excited about a lot of the books that are coming out in June, and we have even more that I'm excited about that we'll be touching on in part 2. If there's any within this chunk of dates going up through the 10th that I didn't mention that you'd like to talk about, feel free to do so in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.